After Grandpa's passing, my parents thought they could claim everything, but I soon realized they missed the real inheritance. Watched to find out how his true legacy came to me in a way they never expected. The phone rang at an odd hour, interrupting the quiet of my evening. The shrill tone cut through the silence like a knife, and I picked it up instinctively, not thinking much of it. The voice on the other end was unmistakable, my mother, but there was an unusual edge to her tone that immediately set me on guard. "Hello," I said, trying to shake off the feeling that something was wrong. She wasted no time. "Grandpa died." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, and for a moment, I couldn't respond. My mind struggled to comprehend what she was saying. Grandpa, gone. The man who had always been there, so steady and strong in my life, had left this world. It didn't make sense. He wasn't supposed to die. He couldn't be gone. My mother continued, her words blunt, matter of fact. He's gone, and we get everything. You get nothing. That's how it is. Just wanted to let you know. The coldness in her voice sent a shiver down my spine. The usual warmth and care she had always shown me in times of distress was absent, replaced with something entirely foreign. I could hear the faint sound of my father's voice in the background, agreeing with her, nodding, and reinforcing the same harsh message. My heart felt heavy, as if it had been crushed under the weight of their words. Grandpa, the man who had always treated me with kindness and love, had passed away, and all they could focus on was how to divide his belongings. It wasn't the news itself that shocked me the most, it was the way it was delivered. There was no sadness, no grief, no hint of loss in their voices. It was as though Grandpa's death had become nothing more than a business transaction to them, a mere formality to be dealt with swiftly and coldly. And I, as usual, was nothing more than an afterthought. I stood there, holding the phone to my ear, my mind racing. I wanted to shout, to scream at them for their heartless words, but I couldn't. Instead, I was frozen by the surreal realization that the family I had known, the one I had always turned to for support, had suddenly become strangers, obsessed with material gain. Their words echoed in my mind. You get nothing. It wasn't just the inheritance they were concerned with, it was the way they had always seen me, as someone beneath them. I wasn't part of their world. Not truly. I was always the one who didn't fit into their expectations, the one who was often dismissed. And now, in the wake of Grandpa's death, it became clear just how little I mattered to them. My parents had always treated me as secondary, but never before had they been so blatantly transparent about it. I wanted to ask why didn't they care about me, about our relationship with Grandpa, about the love and wisdom he had passed down through the years. But I knew the answer. It wasn't about love. It was never about love. For them, it was always about the things that could be measured: the money, the property, the status. My thoughts scattered in 1,000 different directions as I stood there. The phone pressed against my ear. The anger that had bubbled up inside me started to subside, replaced by a strange sense of calm. I wasn't sure how to feel, whether to cry, to scream, or to just hang up and walk away from the conversation. But as I stood there, the words, "You get nothing," still ringing in my ears, something inside me shifted. Despite everything, I couldn't help but smile. It wasn't a bitter smile, or a sarcastic one, but one born of deep understanding. I realized that my parents could have everything they could have: the house, the money, the cars, whatever Grandpa left behind, but they would never have the one thing that mattered most: the love, the bond, the lessons Grandpa had imparted over the years. That was something they couldn't inherit. And I, even without a penny, still had that. Grandpa may have been gone, but his legacy, the true inheritance, was far more valuable than anything my parents could take from him. I smiled because I knew, in that moment, that no amount of money could replace the love and wisdom I had gained from him. And that was something they could never take away from me. As I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, I began to reflect on the years I had spent with Grandpa. The memories flooded in, not as vivid flashes of grief, but as a steady stream of warmth that I could never lose. No matter how hard my parents tried to overshadow it, I realized that my relationship with him had been different from the one my parents had with him. While they had always been caught up in their own world, their own ambitions, and their material pursuits, Grandpa and I had shared something deeper, something that could not be measured by wealth or possessions. Grandpa had never been a man of grand gestures or flashy displays of wealth. He didn't need to be. He was rich in a way that mattered. Rich in wisdom, patience, and love. Every visit to his house had been a quiet sanctuary, a place where I could talk about my dreams, fears, and challenges without being judged. He never dismissed my thoughts as insignificant, never looked at me with disappointment when I didn't follow the conventional path. Instead, he listened, truly listened, and then offered his insights, always delivered in his calm, steady voice, the kind that made everything feel okay, even when the world seemed to be falling apart. I thought back to the times when we would sit on his old wooden porch, sipping lemonade, as he told me stories of his youth. He spoke of times long past, of struggles and triumphs, but it was never in a way that glorified the hardships. Grandpa didn't want to impress me with his experiences or teach me to seek material success. He wanted me to understand the value of resilience, of kindness, of staying true to myself no matter what the world demanded. Those were the lessons that stayed with me, the ones that shaped who I was becoming. When my parents had called to announce his passing, there had been no mention of these memories, no acknowledgement of the man he was beyond the legal documents and assets he left behind. For them, he was a bank account waiting to be accessed, a pile of possessions to be divided and claimed. But Grandpa had always been more than that. He was the person who had given me the tools to navigate the world on my own terms. His teachings weren't about financial success or the accumulation of property. They were about strength of character, empathy, and the quiet power of being good to others. It struck me that my parents, in their greed and pursuit of material gain, had missed the point entirely. They never truly understood him. Their version of Grandpa was a man with money, a man who had something to offer them, but they hadn't seen the depth of his soul, the kindness in his heart. They hadn't learned from him the way I had. While they would fight over his belongings, I would treasure the things that really mattered, the memories, the quiet lessons, the feeling of his hand on my shoulder when I needed guidance, the shared moments of laughter and understanding. In that moment, a wave of peace washed over me. I realized that the inheritance I had received from Grandpa was far more valuable than anything my parents could fight over. It wasn't in the land, or the money, or the property. It was in the wisdom he had passed down to me, the way he had shaped my view of the world and taught me what truly mattered. His legacy was in the quiet strength I carried with me, the confidence to stand firm in the face of adversity, the ability to empathize with others, and the understanding that love, not wealth, was the most important thing we could share. My parents might get everything, but they would never understand what I had inherited. They could fight for every last possession, but they couldn't take away the bond I had with Grandpa. They couldn't steal the lessons he had taught me, nor the memories of the times we had shared. And that, I knew, was the true inheritance, one that no amount of money could ever replace. The real wealth, the one that truly mattered, wasn't something that could be passed down in a will. It was something much deeper, something no one could take away. It was in me, and it would stay with me for the rest of my life. As the days passed after my parents' call, the weight of their words seemed to lift, replaced by an unexpected calm that settled deep within me. While they busied themselves with the formalities of sorting through Grandpa's belongings and discussing how they would divvy up his estate, I found myself looking for something deeper. It wasn't about the inheritance they had claimed, it was about something more intangible, something my parents couldn't see. There had to be more to Grandpa's life than the things he left behind. And as I sat alone in my room, I realized there was something Grandpa had left for me, something that wasn't about money, land, or possessions. It was a legacy of love and wisdom. I hadn't realized it at the time, but Grandpa had always known how to make me feel seen, how to guide me without making me feel pressured. Over the years, our conversations, whether they were about something serious or just small talk, had always held a sense of purpose. They weren't just idle chats. They were lessons, disguised as simple conversations. Grandpa had this remarkable way of making everything feel important, even the smallest of moments. His words weren't just spoken, they were gifts wrapped in kindness, wisdom, and care. And it hit me that these gifts, these quiet lessons, were the true inheritance. One afternoon, as I went through old photo albums, I stumbled upon a small, worn-out notebook. It was one of Grandpa's, filled with scribbles and notes, thoughts that he had written down over the years. I opened it slowly, unsure of what I would find, but what I uncovered took me by surprise. The notebook was full of reflections on life, advice on handling hardships, and reminders to stay true to oneself. There were no grand declarations or pompous statements, just simple, heartfelt truths about living with integrity, the importance of kindness, and how the value of a person could never be measured by what they owned. One passage caught my eye. The things we leave behind don't matter as much as the way we make others feel. Treat people with respect. Listen. Love without hesitation. And remember that the world is bigger than what's in your pocket. What matters is the heart and how you give it away. It was like Grandpa was speaking directly to me, reminding me of everything he had taught me in our years together. And as I read the words over and over again, a smile tugged at my lips. This was the inheritance I would carry with me, the knowledge that the true value of life isn't found in possessions, but in the love and respect we show others. I felt a deep connection to him in that moment, even though he was no longer physically present. His spirit seemed to wrap around me like a warm embrace, guiding me through the uncertainty of my feelings toward my parents and their cold pursuit of material wealth. Grandpa had always been a steady presence, teaching me to see beyond the surface, beyond the physical world. His focus was never on accumulating wealth or achieving outward success. His success was measured in the way he treated others, in the love he shared, and the integrity he maintained. And as I sat there with his notebook in hand, I realized that his true legacy wasn't something that could be passed down in a will or a property division. His legacy was in the lessons, the quiet wisdom, and the love he had poured into me over the years. In that moment, I knew that no matter what my parents received from Grandpa's estate, they would never have this. They couldn't inherit the bond we had shared, nor the way he had shaped my understanding of the world. They could fight for everything Grandpa had left behind, but they couldn't take away the way he had made me feel, the love he had given me, and the lessons he had imparted. I understood now that the inheritance I had received from Grandpa was far richer than any material wealth, because it wasn't something that could be stolen or taken away. It was a part of me, and it would stay with me forever. Grandpa's presence in my life had always been a guiding force. And now, even in his absence, I could feel him beside me, his wisdom echoing in my heart. His final gift to me wasn't something tangible, it was the strength to face the challenges ahead with love, compassion, and integrity. And as I looked down at the notebook, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Grandpa had given me everything I needed, and I realized that no matter what my parents got, I had received the greatest inheritance of all. The days following my parents' call were filled with a strange, almost surreal calm, while my parents busied themselves with the task of sorting through Grandpa's possessions, discussing who would get what and what they would sell or keep. I couldn't help but feel distant from it all. I had expected to feel anger, resentment, maybe even jealousy, but instead, I felt a deep sense of peace. It was as though the chaos that my parents had created in their pursuit of material things had no hold over me. The anger that once seemed inevitable was replaced by a quiet understanding, a realization that I didn't need to engage in their drama, that I didn't need to be a part of the fight for things that, in the grand scheme of things, didn't matter. I thought back to all the times I had been made to feel less important in my parents' eyes. They had always been focused on the tangible, the measurable. Success had been equated with wealth, status, and possessions, and I had never quite fit into that mold. I had always been the dreamer, the one who cared more about the experiences I shared with others than the things I could accumulate. I often wondered if they had ever understood me at all. But as I sat quietly, watching them from a distance, I realized something. Their obsession with possessions wasn't about me, it was about them. It was about their own insecurities, their own need to feel validated by what they had. They saw Grandpa's death as a way to fill the gaps in their own lives, to claim something that they believed would make them whole. It was in that moment of realization that I understood the true value of what Grandpa had given me. He had taught me to live with intention, to focus on what truly mattered. Grandpa had never been concerned with what others thought of him or what he could amass in his lifetime. He had been a man of quiet strength, someone who valued relationships over things. He had spent his life helping others, offering his wisdom and guidance, never expecting anything in return. And now, as his legacy was being reduced to a collection of material possessions, I realized that I was the one who truly understood the depth of his wealth. I didn't need what my parents were fighting over. I didn't need the house, the car, the money, those things. While they may have held value in the eyes of my parents, didn't hold any real meaning for me. What I had inherited from Grandpa was something far more precious, a sense of inner peace, a knowing that the things we accumulate in life are not what define us. It was the ability to look beyond the physical world and recognize the importance of the connections we make with others. It was the wisdom to understand that our true worth lies not in what we own, but in how we live, how we treat others, and how we leave the world better than we found it. As my parents continued to argue over Grandpa's belongings, I found myself becoming more and more detached from the situation. The noise of their greed and entitlement felt distant, like a storm raging far away. While I stood firm and grounded in the peace Grandpa had instilled in me, I didn't need their approval, their validation, or their material wealth. I had something far more valuable, a legacy that couldn't be taken away, something that was already inside me. I smiled to myself as I thought of Grandpa, the man who had taught me that true success isn't measured by the things we accumulate, but by the love we give, the integrity we uphold, and the lives we touch. I realized then that I didn't need to fight for anything. I didn't need to prove my worth. The things my parents were fighting over would never bring them the fulfillment they sought, because they had missed the point entirely. What Grandpa had left me was far richer than any material possession. It was a sense of self, a peace that came from knowing I was enough, exactly as I was. I had learned, through his quiet teachings and his actions, that life was about relationships, not things. It was about being kind, being present, and living with authenticity. My parents could fight for the material wealth Grandpa had left behind, but they would never understand what it meant to truly live a fulfilled life. That understanding, that wisdom, was the inheritance I cherished, and it was something they could never take away from me. In the end, I realized that I had already received everything I needed from Grandpa. The legacy of love, kindness, and wisdom that he had passed on to me was far more valuable than anything my parents could ever claim. And with that understanding, I stood tall, free from the noise of their greed, and at peace with the true inheritance that no one could ever steal. The weeks following Grandpa's passing felt like a dream, surreal and disconnected from reality. My parents, consumed by their desire to claim every tangible thing he had left behind, seemed to have forgotten that the true essence of Grandpa wasn't in the material possessions, but in the intangible things, the moments, the love, the wisdom he shared. I couldn't bring myself to fully engage in their greed-driven discussions, the way they fought over assets that seemed so inconsequential in comparison to what Grandpa had really given me. I didn't need to fight for his things, because I had already inherited the most important part of him, the legacy of his spirit, his teachings, and the quiet strength that he had instilled in me. One night, after everything had settled down and my parents had returned to their busy lives, I sat quietly in my room, reflecting on the man I had loved so dearly. I had always felt a deep connection to him, even when he was alive. But now, in his absence, that connection seemed to grow stronger, like a thread that linked us beyond the physical realm. It was in these quiet moments of reflection that I began to feel his presence more vividly than ever before. It was as if he was still with me, sitting beside me, offering his quiet guidance. I remember one specific night when I had been struggling with a difficult decision. It wasn't about money or inheritance, it was about my life's direction. I had always felt torn between pursuing a conventional career path that my parents had expected of me and following the passions that Grandpa had encouraged me to nurture. The weight of the decision seemed unbearable, and I found myself sitting in the living room, staring at the empty chair where Grandpa used to sit. In that moment, I closed my eyes and asked for a sign, some form of guidance that could help me find clarity. As I sat there, I could almost feel his presence beside me, as if he were right there, his hand on my shoulder, offering silent support. The silence around me was suddenly filled with the quiet whisper of his voice, not spoken aloud, but felt deeply within me. It was as though his spirit had transcended the physical realm and was still guiding me. Follow your heart, his voice seemed to say. Trust in yourself. And remember, it's not the destination that matters, but the journey. Don't be afraid to take the path less traveled. The world is full of possibilities, and it's up to you to create your own path. In that moment, the doubts and fears that had been clouding my mind lifted. It was as though Grandpa was reassuring me that I didn't have to follow the expectations placed on me by others. I didn't have to chase after material success or live a life dictated by society's standards. He had always told me that the most important thing was to stay true to myself. And now, more than ever, I understood the depth of that message. It wasn't the things we own or the titles we hold that define us. It's the person we become along the way, the choices we make, and the way we treat others. As the days went by, I felt Grandpa's presence more strongly, as though he were always with me, guiding me in the choices I made. Every time I faced a challenge or a moment of uncertainty, I could feel him beside me, offering quiet reassurance. I realized that his true legacy wasn't just in the lessons he had taught me when he was alive, but in the way he continued to influence my life even after he was gone. His wisdom, his values, and his love had shaped who I was, and that connection could never be severed by death. It was then that I understood that Grandpa's legacy wasn't about the things he left behind for my parents to fight over. It was in the way he had shaped me, in the values he had instilled in me, and in the quiet moments of connection that continued to guide me. He had taught me to see beyond the material world, to value relationships, integrity, and kindness above all else. And as I sat there, feeling his presence, I knew that his influence would stay with me for the rest of my life. No amount of money, no possession, no material wealth could ever replace the depth of connection I had with Grandpa. His legacy wasn't something that could be divided up in a will. It was something that lived on inside me. As long as I carried his lessons with me, as long as I continued to live by the values he had imparted, his spirit would never be gone. Grandpa had left me with everything I needed, not in the form of things, but in the form of love, wisdom, and the quiet strength to navigate life's challenges. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift of all, a gift that no one, not even my parents, could ever take away from me. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join the family. You won't want to miss more heartfelt stories and life lessons. Hit the bell to stay updated.